Hello everyone, this is Krista from the Crafted Studio Company, and I'm here today with another sugar cookie tutorial. Today we are going to decorate this super sweet collection of florals and polka dots and hearts in a wet-on-wet royal icing technique. These are part of DIY kits that I sell through my company here in Western Canada called Sugar Bee Cookies. And you can feel free to click that link and go find out more, or you can bake your own cookies and make your own icing and follow along. You do not need to have these particular shapes to do this technique. You can just do it on any shape cookie that you wish. So I'm just going to jump in and talk about the kit. So the kit and supplies that you'll need: you'll need scissors and a paper towel or a cloth. I would suggest having water on hand and damp this down as well. And in the kit itself, you will receive a total of 8 cookies. You're going to get 2 of each of these designs. So you're going to get a large heart, a smaller heart, a round, and you're going to get this plaque shape. You are also going to get a total of 4 icings, and these are going to be pre-bagged and ready to go, and they will be in a flood consistency. If you want to learn more about consistencies, if you're making your own, feel free to click the link in the top corner, and I have a Basics 101 on royal icing consistencies. But you're going to get this green. Today we're working in this pretty sage green. Sometimes the colors may vary from batch to batch. You're going to get a white, a light pink, and you're going to get this really pretty deeper pink. The kits will also include a skewer or needle tool. This one is a bamboo cocktail appetizer skewer. I try and provide these in every kit, but when I have excess from my workshops, I also will try to give you this instead, which is an actual scribe or needle tool. These are a cookie decorator's best friend. They help us move the icing around, pop air bubbles, and in this case, it's going to help us create these patterns in the wet-on-wet technique. So before we get going on cookies, I'm actually going to show you how to get comfortable with your icing bags and how to prep them for decorating. I'll just move everything aside. You want to make sure you keep everything on hand and organized so that you can work efficiently. So when you get your icing bag, the first thing you want to do, whether or not you've purchased pre-packaged icing or if you've made your own and let it sit for a bit, is that you want to make sure that you massage the bag and massage the colors and the icing together. Sometimes you'll get a discoloration, and that's just the pigment pulling away from the icing and the water content. So you just want to make sure you massage that back in. In order to cut your bag, now all my bags are pre-cut, as I was already working on the collection, but what you'll want to do, these are tipless bags, you'll just want to pinch the tip, and you'll want to just cut off the tiniest little amount so that you have a nice small opening. This is a flood consistency, so that means that it is very fluid and it's going to level itself out quite a bit, so it will flow out of the bag very easily. You want to make sure that the tip is not cut too big. When you're holding your icing bag, you want to put the thickest part in the palm of your hand so that you have the most control to squeeze with your whole hand or just a couple of fingers as needed for different pressure points. And when you're ready to pipe icing, you'll just want to squeeze a little bit so it connects to the surface of your cookie. Lift and then let the icing drop in place and start releasing when you're ready to end whatever line or pattern you're doing. A lot of people will try and draw closer to the surface, and what happens is you end up squeezing out more icing to try and keep pressure, and you'll find that you don't have a very consistent line. It's very bumpy and you don't have time to correct any issues. When you let it connect to the surface and lift and drop the icing, I broke my line there because I wasn't consistent on my pressure. Lift, let the icing fall into place. You have time to correct any issues that may happen. So when you're trying to do curves, you can see I'm just letting the icing drop. And I have time to pause and fix any areas that I don't like. If you were to try and do this close to the surface, I don't have time to fix any mistakes, and it comes out very uneven. So if you can, I would get comfortable practicing on a surface or a wax paper, piece of parchment, and just kind of learn how your icing moves. So to practice some of the patterns that we are going to do today, you'll need to know how to do dots, which is a little bit different than a line. Rather than lifting away from the surface with dots, you want to hold your tip close to the surface and let the icing bloom up over the tip. A lot of people try and move their icing bag up or around while they're doing dots, and it doesn't come out as clean, and then you have to go in and correct it. So for dots of different sizes, you want to hold the tip very close to the surface, keep it there, consistent pressure until the dot is the size that you want, release the pressure and lift away. And if you have any little peaks or anything, just go in and tap it down with your needle tool. So you'll need to know how to do polka dots today, and we're going to sink that right into the icing. So wet icing is going to go on wet icing, so we get this nice relatively smooth surface. Another technique you're going to need to know is some line work. So kind of like how we were doing the lines earlier, lift away from the surface, but we'll want to get comfortable with these sort of rounded shapes. And you'll want to try and practice them in different angles. One of the other techniques that we're going to need to do is similar to that line work, but where we're actually pressing the icing right into the surface so that we get more in those rounded shapes. And this is going to help us kind of get the lighter colors that you see in the floral work, and then the line work where we're lifting away is going to be the darker colors to highlight it or outline it. So those are just a couple of techniques that you can practice before you actually get onto the cookies here. So the first cookie we're going to work on today in this collection is this sage green round cookie with the simple polka dots in it. Now it may look like a simple cookie on its own, but of course when you put things in a whole collection, you'll want simpler cookies and you'll want some more detailed cookies. So I'm going to set these ones aside. And this is going to be the cookie that we focus on today. Okay, so let's get started with our round cookie. So you'll want to grab your naked round cookie and your green icing. And you'll want to make sure that you have your white icing on hand, because we have to work relatively quick with this. What we're going to be doing is outlining and flooding our cookie in the green, and then when the icing is still wet, we're going to drop those polka dots on in the white, and then that way we get this smooth flat surface and the icing kind of just sinks into itself and becomes one. But we have to do that before the icing starts crusting over. So always clean your tips and your bags off as you go. So you'll see me wiping off my tips of my icing bags and my needle tool frequently. You'll want to start anywhere you're comfortable on the cookie, meaning on any point. I usually start somewhere in the top and work my way around a cookie. You'll want to start somewhere about 1/8 of an inch inwards from the cookie edge, because as we outline and flood it, it's going to push out the icing, and we're also going to work it, and we want space to work it around without it flowing over the edges of the cookie. Also, once we start putting in this white icing, it means that we're putting more icing into that, and it pushes it out even further. So we start and we connect, we lift, and we just slowly work around the outline. As best you can. And it's not even, and I know that. You know, some areas are closer to the edge than the others, but we're going to correct that when we fill it. Now, to fill your icing, my tip is all crinkled. To fill your icing, we're going to use more pressure, so we're squeezing even harder. And you can see that's about how hard I'm going to be squeezing to push out icing. And I'm just going to slowly work my way around. Really letting that icing push itself. I'm keeping the tip close. I'm letting the icing kind of work around the tip, and I'm actually using the tip to kind of push through the icing itself. And don't worry about these areas that we have like this that are going to be bare. You're going to have more of them. But from there, we're going to work our way. And I'm almost squeezing just a little less icing now. I wanted more around the outsides, but I'm just slowly working my way around. And give your hand a break if you need to. This can be very hard on the hands. You also want to make sure that you're not squeezing so hard that you bubble or burst your bag. Even if they are anti-burst bags, too much pressure will put the icing and the plastic to stretching and possibly bursting on you. Go ahead and finish it up. Now, some of you may have bare spots, kind of like what we're seeing on the edges here. That's okay. Go in and just fill it a little bit more. Or if you have enough icing in here, you should be able to start working it. And you can see, I'm just doing these slow little or quick little whipping motions. And I'm almost picking up the icing because I have enough in here to work with. I'm not dragging on the cookie itself. Picking up the icing, and I'm pushing it to where I want it to go. And this is where I start working my outline if my outline was not what I wanted. And you can turn the cookie carefully if you want. Some people work on a little turntable. And the point of the turntable is so that we don't really touch the cookie too much, because the more you touch the cookie, the more risk you have of disrupting the icing or touching it or mucking it up with your fingers. But just go through and work it. You will want to be fairly not fast at this, but you want to work consistently because the icing will start to crust up. And we want to make sure we give it time to stay wet. We want to make sure we give ourselves enough time while it's wet, I should say, so that we can drop that other icing in there and get our patterns. Now I can see my icing, I forgot to massage the bag, so I'm getting these little discoloration lines in there. So I'm just mixing that up, but it was fine. If you want to level out your cookie, just grab it a little bit. I'm actually grabbing the cookie without pressing into it, and I'm just giving it a little shake. and that helps settle and flood the icing out. Okay. And you can pop any air bubbles if you see them coming up. They do start to rise sometimes if they are in your icing. Now, we're going to take our white and we're going to create just this simple little polka dot pattern. Now, just off to the side with another color, I'm just going to show you, I'm creating the tiniest little dots. You can even go a little bit bigger if you want to. But all I'm doing is just squeezing a little bit out, releasing and pulling away. The reason why we're doing little dots is because they do spread when they connect with the other wet icing. You can do bigger dots if you want to, but you don't want to press too much icing into this existing icing because it will spread it, and you don't want it to push out and make your outer lines wonky, and you don't want it to push and fall off the edges of the cookie either. So I'm going to pick what I feel is the middle and just create a dot there. And then from there, I'm actually just going to come up to about here and down to here, leaving about an inch in between, and I'm going to create another little dot. And you can see this one is already spreading in that icing. Now, if you have room up above and down below, we can put icing there too, but I'm going to wait to put polka dots there because I want to start getting my pattern in place and then seeing what spacing I really have and need. So just offset to here, I'm going to create little dots there. And this one, I'm going to come down and go up. And on the other side, I'm going to do the same. When I'm doing polka dot patterns, I tend to work from side to side so that I keep my pattern as balanced as possible. Now, the sides of your cookie are going to crust up a lot faster, or anywhere if you have a cookie like with a heart that has a point, anywhere that there's less icing is where it's going to start crusting up. But you can see all these polka dots are starting to spread. These ones might not spread as much on the edge because that icing is starting to crust up. But also my icing might not sink down into the other green icing as much. So I'm just going to tap it and help it along a little bit. You can give your cookie a little tap or a little shake. But that is super sweet and exactly what we're looking for. Okay, so the next cookie in the collection that we're going to work on is this super sweet little small heart with this floral pattern in it. So the small heart, not the big one. And we're going to flood it in our white icing. So I usually start somewhere near the middle at the top and just slowly work your way around. Now, one thing you're seeing me do is I'm actually holding my icing and I'm with my other hand, my bag, my wrist, sometimes just the bag itself. That's going to give you a little bit of control when you're piping. And if you have little drips and blobs, feel free to go ahead and drop it on the cookie because we're going to be covering that up. Also, you can see I tried to make sure that I piped with a little bit of ledge of cookie still showing so that I have room to put flood in and let it push out if it needs to. Especially with this cookie because we're adding quite a bit more icing than just with the polka dots by putting those floral patterns in here. Go slow. I'm working a little quicker just for the sake of the camera, But also when you go quicker, you tend to squeeze harder, and that's when you can burst your bags. But you can see I've left some bare spots, and this is going to be common when you're just flooding and learning. So this is where you want to make sure that you use your needle tool in little round whipping motions. And you can kind of pull the icing to where you want it to be too. You give it a little shake and settle it out. Tap down in areas that leave little peaks. And that's how you flood a heart. Now, you want to make sure you have all your other colors on hand and close at hand. We are going to be starting with our lighter pink, and I'm going to be dropping in this icing here. And I'm going to start from the center of the cookie, or from the center of the heart, not the heart. I'll learn to speak later. I'm going to be starting from the center of the flower. And I want to kind of offset my flower so that it's on this side of the cookie. You can go anywhere you want. If you want to go in the bigger part of the heart, you can. If you want to go smack in the center, that's okay too. And this is all your own design. But all I'm going to do is I'm going to be squeezing almost like a little 6 into the center, a little swirl. And unlike the line work where you're touching and lifting and dropping, I'm actually doing what I suggested not to in the beginning, where I'm pressing icing into the center there. And this is because I don't care about clean lines. I'm just trying to get the color down. So from here, I'm actually just going to start creating the idea of floral petals. And some of them I'm going to do as single bumps, and some of them I'm going to do as doubles. You can do however your mind sees it, but you want to leave white space. You want to leave space in between them, because we're also going to be coming in with the darker pink. And this is really however you want it. And you can see I'm using the tip of my icing almost like a scribe tool. Keep it simple. You can always go back in and add more color if you want to, but I would just keep it very, very, very simple. Just get the rough idea down. Now, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be outlining that with our darker pink so that we really start seeing the flower. And I'm going on the outside of my pink. And this is where you want to do a little bit more of that line work. So for thinner, more clear lines, you want to kind of just lift up away. I actually ended up going more in the center of my cookie. Now, if you've lost some of your pink, your lighter pink, you can go back in and squeeze more in. But I would suggest trying to make sure you leave some of that white showing, because that helps give you contrast. And don't forget, this will spread as it settles, so you don't need too much. Also, the more icing you put in, the more it spreads your base. You can feel free to tap your cookie if you can grab it carefully to help some of those colors settle in. Or you can just tap and stitch them in with your needle tool. Now, this is the beauty of this wet on wet technique. You can start pulling through the icing and creating additional petals if you want, or additional lines, or where you kind of lost definition. Just go slowly. You can also drag through and kind of drag the icing a little bit more some places, and make sure you wipe your tip off in between. Flowers are imperfectly perfect in nature, so just do what you think looks good for you. I think this one I want it to swirl a little bit that way. And there. Try not to overwork it because it is going to start crusting over. You can see potentially in the light here that I'm leaving little ridges and bumps, and I'm just going to tap those down almost like I'm stitching. But the more we work it, the more you're going to get those ridges and uneven texture, and you want it to be as smooth as possible. You also want to make sure that you have time to go in and add a little green if you want to. So like this one, I'm going to just add a couple of little green dots right into the icing. I like to work in little trios and doubles, and then if I have room somewhere, like here I had more space up there, but down here I just want a little single. Super sweet. So we're going to put that one aside now. Very carefully move it. And we're going to move on to our next cookie. So the next cookie we're going to work on is this polka dot and floral plaque shape. And why I love this one is because we can do this and you can sink your dots in, and then you can use this later once it's dry, and you can actually add more definition or techniques to, like you could add like a little heart to, for example. When it's dry, you can kind of come in for a little dimension. You could add a little heart. This one, I did the polka dots in a random pattern. I didn't do them in a structured pattern like I did on our, our green. So you can put polka dots wherever you want. I just like to work in a pattern. So this one, I'm going to be doing that specific pattern as best as I can. I also, when I was doing this one, I don't know if the camera is going to pick it up, but you can see they're bumpy, like little knobs. Knob and nail milk glass vases come to mind. So that means that I did this when the icing was starting to crust over and it didn't sink in enough. So we want to make sure we work fairly quickly. So with our white icing, clean your tips. And with this kind of different shapes and plaque shapes, I quite often will do these instead of one fluid line along. I see right now that I have a little chip in my cookie. That probably will not show much once I get it iced. When I'm doing these plaque shapes, quite often I will, instead of going all the way around, I'll break it down into sort of sections. So I'm gonna do, I have a little blob that I don't like, so pick it up with your needle tool if that happens. So I'm going to start here, and I'm going to break this down into sections like this. Almost individual lines. And I'm doing this so that I get a crisp pattern that's going to be even all the way around the cookie. And I'm going to come down here. Now you can do this however you want. If you want to work all the way around, do it. This is just a trick that I can show to get a cleaner outline on a funny shape when you're just starting out. Okay. Now you'll want to be very careful when you're moving cookies like this because your fingers are likely to muck up your image. So that's when I use my needle tool. Okay. So we're going to go in and we're going to flood this guy. And again, go slow. The speed you actually want to be going at is probably about this speed right here. But for the sake of video, I'm going a little bit faster. And the difference is you're going to see it's not as consistent. I'm going to have to work the icing a little bit more. And you'll only ever really be able to go faster when you have a flood consistency. I would suggest just going as slow as possible though, so you gain the most control. Or keep the most control. So because I broke down those lines to individual sections when we outlined, I have a nice clean symmetrical shape going on here. I'm going to give my cookie a little shake to help level out any areas that are thicker and thinner than each other. All right, so we're going to go in on one side. I'm going to do my little swirly 6, and then I'm going to start building out petal shapes. And these can have a little more icing. You can double up the lines if you want to. But try not to push too much icing down into the white because you don't want to overflow your cookie. Now remember, you're going to crest up more on the edges quicker. So just monitor those and tap them back in. Or give your cookie a little careful tap to help sink that icing. And then we're going to grab our dark pink. And any of those areas that look like they're crusting up, go ahead and do first if you need to, instead of just working your way from the inside out. There's no right or wrong. You've already got your general pattern down. This is meant to be your fun and to do however you want. I'm going to add a little extra loop there. I'm just picking up some of that color back in here, but I'm leaving some white so I get the contrast. And of course, the more, as it settles more and more, it will spread out. All right. Cookies are surprisingly resilient. If you bake them so that they're not super dry, you'll find that you'll be able to get a good strong tap on them without breaking them. I mean, of course, it depends on the cookie too. If you have a cookie that has funny little thin areas that poke out, then they might snap off. But like a gingerbread man comes to mind with the little arms. Okay, and then you can go through if you feel you need it and define some of those areas. Like you can swirl them in a little bit if you want. Again, the certain areas near the edges will crust faster. So, oh, see, look, I put my whole hand right into that. Make sure you clean your tip off in between things. That's what I'm doing sort of off the front of the camera here. Go in and fix any muck-ups that you do. Cleaning the tip in between everything. I don't like this one line in here. I feel like it's got a big bare area. There we go. And not every one of your bumps needs to have one of these little petal dips in it. Just pick a few. And then tap down any areas like here that are crusting over and leaving texture that you don't want. Pretty flowers. Okay, you can leave it like this if you want, or you can come in with polka dots. Now, when I'm working on an offset thing like this, normally I would start in the middle of my cookie. But you can actually use the pattern from starting from there to there and creating that as your middle, sort of down here. I am still going to use that center mark as my middle. So I know that that is generally the middle of my cookie. So that's where I'm going to work for my polka dots. And again, I'm not going to come down to here and here until I see how the rest of the pattern is sitting and how full it looks. Because sometimes you don't need it. Just tiny little dots. And I do need one more down here. And I think I'm going to just leave it at that. I think. This is where you can really start mucking it up. You try and add too much. Okay. So if you have the ability to grab your cookie, if you've left enough of a ledge, go ahead and tap those down. Try not to shimmy or shake it too much because the icing is very fluid and you're going to shift your patterns. If you have any of those bumps sort of sitting up, try and tap them in so that we can get them to lay more level. Make sure you do clean off your tip so that, you know, if you end up touching the white somewhere, you don't end up pushing that green into the white somehow. There you go. And when this dries or crusts over, even in about 15 to 20 minutes when it's just crusted on top, you could add other little details or you could write somebody's name. If it was completely dry, you could take an edible marker and write, you know, I love you or whatever you want. So that's a super sweet set too. I'm going to set these guys aside very carefully. What I would suggest is move them if possible with your needle tool so that you don't put your fingers into things and muck them up. And then we'll move on to the next cookie. So the next cookie we're going to work on is our large heart. Now this is a nice sort of offset heart shape and it lends to lots of different patterns. So for that reason, I kind of created this section. So we're going to learn today about sections, not just wet on wet. So what we want to do is we want to do one, say the green versus the white background. We want to do one section and let it crust over for a minute or two, and then we're going to come in with the other section. We're going to do the green first, because by the time we do the green and put the polka dots on, and then we get situated with cleaning our bags and tips and needle tools, we should be able to come in and start the white, at least filling it on this side, and then working our way close to the green. And that is going to let the edges of the green crust up just enough that we get, when we get the white to it, we're going to get that definitive section line, and it's not going to bleed together like these do with the white on wet. So if you have an edible marker, feel free to use the marker to draw on your cookie. I would suggest a lighter color like a light pink or a yellow or orange, and create that line. You can also just use your scribe tool to scratch into the cookie. Don't press into the cookie because you don't want to break it. But you can scratch a general idea of the mark. You'll just want to make sure that you get rid of any, well, there you go, you can kind of see it. You just want to make sure that you get rid of any crumbs with a brush, or just with your clean hand, wipe it off. So you probably won't be able to see that line with the lighting, but I can. Maybe. No, you can't see it, but there is a line there that I can follow. It's just enough for my eye to see. And with my green icing, I'm going to quickly and carefully use that as a guide mark to outline that. And then I'm going to go through and outline the rest of my cookie. Then we can go in and we can flood our cookie. Now when we get down to narrow areas like this, I'm going to release my pressure a little bit, put less icing in, and I'm almost going to use the bag as a needle tool to just kind of pull it down into areas that I want. And then that way we're not pushing too much icing into a thin area and having it risk spilling over. And then go through and work that icing. Hold on to your cookie carefully if you can. I got icing all over my fingers. Turn your cookie as needed. Now if you're working on a smaller cookie and you don't have an area to kind of hold it down, you can use a toothpick or a skewer and hold it down that way. Whatever gives you a little stability. But turning your cookie all around and seeing it from different angles really helps. See, and I just put my finger into the cookie. And if you're going to muck up your cookie, that's probably when it's going to be. It's when you're moving your cookie around. So I'm going to just help this along and give it a tap. I can see that area is a little thin. Okay. So I'm going to want to go in with my white dots, my polka dots right off the bat, because this is going to start crusting up down here pretty quick because it's narrow. But I'm going to start actually up here. And instead of that pattern of going straight up and down like in other cookies, I'm actually going to use the curve as my pattern. So I'm going down the center. Of my cookie. And just while I have a moment, because this is going to crust up faster on this bottom area, I'm going to just tap those in because they're not going to have time to sink in while it's crusting. And then I'm going to go through and fill out my pattern. And you can just put the polka dots wherever you want. They don't have to be patterned. I forgot one right over here. You just want it to look balanced enough so that it matches and coordinates with the rest of the collection. Okay, so now we're going to give this a moment to crust over so that when we put the white in, it's going to have that very defined section line. So this is when you want to make sure your tools are clean, get reorganized, clean off the tips of your bags. You can see this is my cloth has got food coloring all over it. I keep very separate cloths for my cookie decorating than I do for the rest of my household stuff or cleaning stuff in the kitchen. All right. So while that is still crusting over, I'm going to come through at least and do my outline of my white around the edge of my cookie. So I'm going to connect to where the green was at least. And if you're feeling particularly competent and confident, you can also do a white line in here. And what that does is it just creates an additional barrier against the green so that when we flood it, it'll kind of just slow the icing from melting into the green or kind of going up onto the green in inconsistent ways. It's not needed. You will be able to flood right up against that if you let this crust over enough. And normally you want to give it about 5 to 10 minutes. I'm going to go through and put a line in here. Go slow. You can see I'm using my opposite hand to kind of steady and guide myself. And this is not going to be perfect, you know, especially there, but it's just going to give me that extra little barrier. And you can go through and level that out a little bit if you want to, but it's not needed. Okay, so while this is still crusting up in here, I'm going to start filling my cookie on this side and slowly making my way over there. Whatever extra time we can give sections to crust over, the better. So instead of going all the way around and around and around, I'm just focusing on this one side for the moment. And now I'm going to come through. I'm just slowing down and releasing my pressure when I get to thinner areas. Sometimes you have to push the icing down and rework where your knot is or your... Go through and fill any bare areas or thin areas. And level out your icing. And this is where you can really level out your pattern if you don't like the line that you did with the green. You can kind of go up over the green if you want to. You do risk it melting together though if you haven't let it crust over enough. But you can see I have enough icing in here to really push and move around without making it too thin in other areas. Just slowly working it to create the shape that I want. Okay. So for this cookie, I did two florals. So we're going to start with our pink again. And I'm actually just going to get my spacing. I feel like I have a little, yeah. Something had dropped into my icing there. I think a little crusted piece of green. Okay. So I'm actually just going to create myself little guideline marks with little pink dots there and there. That's where my center of my flower is going to be, because this one's going to be a smaller one, and I may actually use it as the center and then just half a flower coming off the side. It depends on my spacing. So I'm going to go through and make my little swirl like we did before. And my light is starting to fritz. I had to just fix the connection. There's no right or wrong for your pattern. Just make sure that when you're working close to the green that you're not pushing so much icing that it's pushing the white onto the green. You want a general rounded shape, but honestly, your flower can be however you want it to be. Okay, so I wouldn't suggest tapping this, because it's a bigger cookie and you're going to risk mucking it up, but also you don't want to disturb this icing. So as this is crusting, the green underneath is very fluid. So the more you shake it and tap it, the fluidity underneath is going to move, but the top is going to try and stay in place because it's crusted, and you could risk sort of cracking it. So you'll want to work quickly, but you'll also just want to take a moment to tap some of that icing in. And I'm going to finish this one first before I go on to that one so that I can see what my spacing truly is. Remember to clean your tips every once in a while so that you get off any excess globs that if you've put your tip down into the other colors. And again, as noted earlier, you're going to crust up quicker on the edges. So keep that in mind. If it's not sinking down, it just might need a little extra help. And if you have a little texturing on top, that's fine too. Okay, and then if you have any little areas you want to create, now you can see that's not healing up as quickly, that scar that I made, so just stitch it. That's because it's starting to crust. Okay, I think I'm going to leave that one. Just going to add a little pink as well, or a light pink. I'm just trying not to add too much because there is a lot of icing in here now, and it's starting to push my icing around a bit. My flood, my base flood of white. And the more that moves, the more your pattern can shift. And sometimes it's almost like you're painting with your needle tool. Think of it as like little brush strokes or little knitting stitches. Okay, While we have time, I'm going to go through and make just a tiny little bud of a flower here. If you don't have space, don't worry about it. I just want the idea of a little flower on the top corner here. And you'll see, doing a more detailed, bigger cookie like this, how the icing is going to start setting up on you. So it's always better to go simpler. Than too detailed, because the more detailed you are, the more at risk you are of losing your entire shape. Turn the cookie if you need to. And this one I'm not going to fuss with as much. I'm just going to leave it very, very, very simple because of that timing, but also because this is just meant to be the hint of a little extra flower in the corner. All right, and while I have time, I'm just going to go in and tie this all together with a couple of little polka dots in the green. I think I'm going to do a trio there too. And just help those along and stitch them down. And how sweet is that? So, you guys have created a very fun heart, floral, and polka dot collection. Perfect for Valentine's Day or spring. I mean, really any time of year. Now you can't stack these or anything at this time. You'll want to leave them. I'm moving them around way too much. Just trying to find how they fit best on the screen for you to see. And I do know the light's glaring off of it a little bit. But you can create beautiful cookies, beautiful florals. So well done, everyone. Thank you so much for watching, and I really hope you have a beautiful day.